According to Palestinian witnesses, Israeli tanks reached the outskirts of Gaza City, entering the Zaytun district. Reports suggest the IDF has taken control of Salah al-Din Road, a major route linking the north and south. To the north, intense fighting has been reported between Israeli forces and Hamas near the Mediterranean coast. But the most recent developments involve the hostages. Let's go live to our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, who is in southern Israel.
Krishnan, Prime Minister Netanyahu today said that their onslaught on Gaza was going step by step. He said it was systematic. He said it was possible to do two things at once: to destroy Hamas militarily and as a government in Gaza, and also to rescue hostages. And his evidence of that was one female soldier who they did manage to rescue. But at the same time, that is going to be very difficult. There was a hostage video released today by Hamas. Now, we are not going to play that video because obviously the hostages in it, there were 3 women, 1 spoke. They were under duress. Nobody does a hostage video without there being pressure on them. You couldn't really see exactly where they were. We know from 1 or 2 hostages who've been released that they are kept some of the time in tunnels. What the woman had to say, obviously she looked terrified. She railed against the Israeli government. Presumably, she was told to do that by Hamas. People may find some of the images in my report distressing. The 3 hostages appeared in a Hamas video, which we won't play. Daniel Aloni in the middle, clearly distressed, shouted at the camera, begging the Israeli government to negotiate their release. Rimon Kirscht on the left and Lena Trupanov on the right were silent. Families of other hostages watched, hope because it means some are alive, despair because of the anguish in the women's faces. The Prime Minister, who visited an elite police unit today, called the video psychological propaganda. He said Israeli troops had found and rescued a female soldier seen here in the centre who'd been taken hostage.
במקביל אנחנו ממשיכים את המאמצים לשחרר את החטופים גם במהלך התמרון, והתמרון אפילו מייצר אפשרויות להשיג שחרור ואנחנו לא נחמיץ אותם.
It was announced that Shani Luke, a German Israeli who had been seen being paraded in a pickup, was dead. Her remains were found at the site of the Nova Festival from where Hamas had seized her. Inside Gaza, there's no let-up in the suffering and loss. An Israeli airstrike hit a family house in Rafah, down in the south, exactly where Israel had told people to go to be safe. Nowhere is safe. Even when they manage to rescue the injured, the hospitals are so short of supplies that people are unlikely to get the treatment they need. Tens of thousands are camping around the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City, despite Israeli government warnings that they should move south and that Hamas has its headquarters in a tunnel beneath the hospital. Death is everywhere and fatalism has set in.
أنا من الناس النازحة في مستشفى الشفا هنا من بعد القصف اللي صار عندنا في السجاعية وعامة يعني في فلسطين كلها في غزة كلها. فإحنا أحسن مكان وأمن مكان هو لنا الشفا هنا. فاحنا اجينا هنا على الشفا. اليوم احنا باليهود بتقول لك احنا بدنا نخبط الشفا. بالنسبه لنا يخبطوا الشفا ما يخبطوش الشفا عادي، امور عاديه يعني صارت عندنا. احنا بنخافش يعني يخبطوا ايش ما بدهم يسووا. احنا بالاول وبالاخر احنا شهداء عند ربنا.
The fighting is very near Al-Quds hospital. There is no escape and no protection.
There's nothing coming into ship. The amount is not enough to for the hospitals in Rafah itself, let alone for the whole of the Gaza Strip. And now that the Israelis have cut off Gaza from the north, from the south, certainly nothing is coming in.
This footage, taken by a Palestinian journalist, shows Israeli armour blocking the Salah al-Din highway, which people need to go south. What appears to be a civilian car approaches and the tank fires. The journalist screams, "Get back," for everyone to leave as quickly as possible. From southern Israel, you can see the bombardment. and a few Israelis come to watch.
הם באו בשביל להרוג, והם חיים בשביל להרוג. הם יהרגו את כולם בשביל האדמה. אנחנו חיים בשביל לחיות, ואנחנו מקדשים את החיים, הם מקדשים את המתים.
למה הילדים שלנו גם לא סבלו? לא ראיתם את הילדים שלנו נחטפו? כל הדברים האלו, אני כאילו לא מבינה בכלל איך אתם מעלים את זה בכלל שהילדים שלהם מסכנים חפים מפשע. הילדים שלנו סבלו, זה מספיק, ולראות את זה, זה הכל.
So from your point of view, there are no innocent Palestinians then in Gaza, not even the children, is that right?
הכל כמקשה אחת.
Today, the Israeli army released video which it said showed coordinated airstrikes and ground forces inside Gaza. They're pushing in ever deeper, advancing on Gaza City from two sides, still determined to wipe out Hamas, seemingly whatever the human cost. Now, I may sound a little breathless now because just when we were playing that story, there was some incoming fire from Gaza and we had to go and take cover. Now, it's not particularly dangerous. It gets shot down by the Israeli air defense system Iron Dome. But what it proves is that Hamas is still in business, that despite this onslaught from the air and from the land, it is still possible for Hamas to fire rockets. And what we're seeing is that they are fighting the Israelis. Now, neither the Israelis nor Hamas are going to be honest with us about the fighting, what exactly is happening. But I think that we can say that it is very much an active combat zone. It is not that the Israelis, with their greater firepower, are able to go in and just wipe out Hamas. They can't. And of course, the more fighting there is, the more dangerous it is for the civilians, many of whom remain in Gaza City.
Lindsay, it's fascinating what you're saying. And I mean, there are people in Israel who are saying that actually it looks at the moment, however cautious one makes this sound, and also however horrendous the civilian casualties are on the Palestinian side in Gaza, that the Israelis are beginning to achieve some of their objectives. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yes, certainly there. Everybody is pointing over here, and I'm not quite sure what they're seeing, but there does seem to be some. There's a fire over there, and there does seem to have been. I think that maybe that was the Hamas rocket that came in that may have hit down there on the Israeli side. So they are asking us if we wouldn't mind leaving. So I do apologise. I'm going to have to go in a minute. But certainly the Israelis do think that they are winning. They say that they have taken out, in their words, many of the Hamas leadership, but they haven't got the top leadership. And the question always is Hamas hiding amongst the civilian population. How far will Israel go? Will it really attack hospitals as it's threatened to do? Because they say Hamas is in tunnels underneath. And I think that what Prime Minister Netanyahu has said is that this may go on for a very long time.
It does sound like that, doesn't it? Lindsay, take care of yourself. Thank you very much indeed. Now, while the world's focus has been on Gaza, the UN says that as many as 120 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since October the 7th. And the United States has warned Israel to rein in extremist settlers, saying that violence against innocent residents in the occupied territory was totally unacceptable. Well, we've been to two villages, one evacuated amid threats by settlers. The other was given 24 hours notice to leave, but the residents there decided to stay. Watch. At heart and for so long, this conflict has been about land, this parched land, and who has the right to call it home. The occupied West Bank should be the core of an independent Palestinian state, but it's become a troubled archipelago of warring communities, Palestinian villages and towns side by side with illegal Israeli settlements. These signs are everywhere, but the greater menace is posed by the Israeli settlers and the army that protects only them. Case in point, we came across these soldiers this morning dealing with a small demonstration. One of the shots that rang out killed a Palestinian youth. What's going on? What they're demonstrating against and what we've come to see is the alarming rise in evictions since October the 7th. In the village of Susia, the playground is inhabited only by ghosts. The Palestinian villagers are afraid to stay out in the open in case the settlers take potshots. So this is your olive oil?
Yeah, olive oil. Also, this is our za'atar.
The za'atar. Oh, I love the za'atar.
Za'atar.
Nasser invites me into his kitchen. His wife Sarah has baked fresh bread. The hospitality here is impeccable, and the threats from the Israeli settlers, who live less than a kilometer away, are unmistakable. What reason did the settlers give you, or the army, for leaving? What did they say?
Nothing. Just coming and say 24 hours living, or we kill you.
Are you going to leave?
No. We resisting. We stay.
You stay here?
Yeah.
One of the reasons they're not leaving is that they've already had to do so once before, when his father was thrown out of the village where he was born.
But the reason...
Outside, Nasser shows me another trick the settlers get up to.
Yeah. You see?
Oh, yes. So the settlers cut the electricity
lines
into the village.
Yeah, in the village, Sha'b al-Bottom, yeah.
As you can see, the main access from the road to the village has been blocked by these boulders, which have been moved here by the settlers in the middle of the night, just as they block the local well for the village and they cut the electricity wires. They do everything they can to render life in these villages unlivable. Pure intimidation, illegal under international law, but happening. 10 minutes drive away, the village of Zanuta, a hive of DIY activity. But here they're not building, they're dismantling, packing up to leave for good. In Zanuta, the threat has worked.
يعني نروح على منطقة عند مجازف عند وين الرمادين بالضبط هناك. We're going to another area. It's nearby a checkpoint and Ramadin area.
Yeah.
It's also area C.
But do they have a house there?
عندكم دار غاد؟
ولا حاجة.
Nothing.
في استرابي في السهل.
Only like a field.
So how will they live?
كيف راح تعيش هناك؟
بين الله شو نصور.
God's help us.
God help. And how long have they been here in this place?
قديش لكم ساكنين هون؟
استاذنا.
I'm sorry. He said it in the beginning, generations. He don't remember.
The main reason why the houses here are so flimsy is that the Palestinian villagers never get the permission from the Israeli authorities to build anything more solid, more permanent. And on this door, we find a bitter irony. So it says here, humanitarian support to Palestinians at risk of forcible transfer in the West Bank. And at least a dozen sponsors, including the UK. And guess what? That's exactly what's happening. Forcible transfer of people. What on earth? Like an insult to those packing up their homes and dismantling their dwellings, straddling the hill next door, the most solid building for miles, the headquarters of the Israeli Settler Authority in this part of the West Bank. Do you have any rights here?
We don't have any rights because it's the ones that are responsible for our life, the judge that we are asking them, for example, a permission to build a school, a permission to build a home, are the settlers that are aiming to take us away from here.
As he helps to roll up the family carpets in the house that used to be his, in the village that he grew up calling home, Nassim may be too young to understand, but he will never forget. Well, in Tel Aviv now is Danny Danon, former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations and a senior member of the Likud party in the Knesset. Danny Danon, thanks very much for coming on our program. I just wanted to get your reaction to what's been going on with some of the settlers in the West Bank, intimidating local Palestinian villagers, basically telling them they've got to leave their homes or they might get shot within 24 hours.
Well, first of all, we are very clear. We have nothing against the Palestinians who live in Judea and Samaria. We are focused fighting against Hamas, period. But I would advise, those in Judea and Samaria not to test our resilience. We have seen an increase in violence coming from some of the Palestinians, and we call everybody to calm down. Yes, it's going to be sensitive times ahead of us, but we expect that all sides will show restraint. We are determined to fight with Hamas until the end. So it will take some time. It will not be easy for some parties, but definitely we have no interest to see any unrest in Judea and Samaria.
I know that your hands are tied with Gaza at the moment. You're busy over there. But the point about the West Bank is that if you don't rein in the extremist settlers, if you don't stop their activities, you're just going to build up even more resentment for the future. And we already know that Hamas is popular on these streets. You presumably don't want them to become more popular.
So I don't accept that assumption of extremist settlers. You know, today you have peaceful people living in Judea and Samaria. Sometimes you have radicals on both sides, but the authorities are doing their best to contain and to control those voices. And we have seen activities of the security forces in Judea and Samaria in the last few weeks. So the goal, as I said earlier, is to keep Judea and Samaria calm and to make sure we can focus on the Hamas. That's our main goal. But we have to realize, Matt, that you have Hamas cells in Judea and Samaria. We have arrested many activists of Hamas in the last few days, and that creates unrest among some of the Palestinians.
Right. I just want to run this quote past you. This is attributed to your boss, the Prime Minister, from 2019. He said, "Those who want to thwart a Palestinian state," said Bibi Netanyahu, "should support Hamas and channel money to them." This is, widely circulated on social media. It's not been denied by the Prime Minister's office. What was he up to by saying that?
Well, I have to tell you that, I haven't heard the Prime Minister say those words. I read about it also, but, I sit with him a lot, and I never heard him say that, and I don't think he believes in it. And I think we will have to look at the conception that we had in the past, that if we will actually better the lives of the Palestinians in Gaza, Hamas will be restrained and will not start to attack us. But, my position was always on the contrary, because I know the leadership of Hamas. They don't care about the well-being of the people of Gaza. And in many occasions, they said it publicly. They said, we are focused on fighting the Jews, fighting Israel. The UN, the Israelis, they will take care of the civilians in Gaza. So I think the conception of economy, a better life for the Palestinians, that collapsed.
Right, but the broader accusation here, Danny Danon, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's been in power for an awfully long time, has done his level best to undermine the Palestinian Authority here in Ramallah and to basically make a genuine two-state solution less and less viable over time because, frankly, he just doesn't believe in it.
No, I beg to differ with you. We disengaged from Gaza 18 years ago in 2005. We realized that the PA will be in charge of Gaza. But look what happened. Hamas took over. Barbarically, they threw the leadership of the PA from the rooftops in Gaza. So the PA left Gaza completely. When was the last time that President Abbas visited Gaza? You cannot tell me, because he is afraid to enter Gaza. So basically, you cannot speak about a unity between the PA and Hamas. It's two different entities. We work with the PA on some issues. With Hamas, we cannot work. We have to fight. And that's exactly what we are doing now. We are fighting evil.
Okay. All right. In 10 seconds, are you still worried, as the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Knesset, that this conflict could spread, that it could explode and not just implode?
Well, we hope that Hezbollah and Iran and their proxies will not enter the war. If they will pay a heavy price. We are defending ourselves. It was an unprovoked attack against us. You saw the picture, the massacre, the brutality. We have no other way but to fight those terrorists.
Okay. All right, going to leave it there. Danny Danon in Tel Aviv, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now here in Ramallah is Mustafa Barghouti, who's been a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council for 18 years, and Noor Oudeh, former spokeswoman to the Palestinian Authority. Thank you very much to both of you for coming to this rather windy rooftop in the middle of Ramallah. Let me start with you, Mustafa. I put that accusation to Danny Danon that Bibi Netanyahu has been undermining attempts at a two-state solution. Would you agree with that criticism?
And he's not hiding it. You could just ask him in a press conference whether he supports two-state solution, and he will tell you he wouldn't. And this man came to power with one agenda: to kill Oslo process, to kill the peace agreement, and to prevent any possibility of a Palestinian state. It's well known.
But the fact that Hamas is popular on these streets, I saw just the other day when I was here talking to people, far more popular than many people would like to admit. That's not just down to the Israelis, is it? That's also down to what the Palestinian Authority has or has not done right here.
Yeah, that's normal because the Palestinian Authority failed to deliver what they promised by signing Oslo Agreement.
Yeah.
They promised the people that they will see a Palestinian state. Israel did not allow them to get any state. And eventually, of course, the public lost our belief in the so-called peace process, which Netanyahu has obstructed constantly. And the result, of course, is that people understand now one thing, that Israel only understands the language of force.
No, Uday, the accusation that the Palestinian Authority didn't come good on its promises, what do you say to that? You used to speak for them.
A lifetime ago, but yes.
A lifetime ago.
Look, I think that it's not just Netanyahu. I think also the sponsors of this so-called peace process have made a fool out of the Palestinian peace camp. They have watched for at least 2 decades as the Palestinian peace camp has been undermined, made unable to deliver, been requested repeatedly to do very unpopular actions by way of quashing freedom of expression, by way of fighting the presence of other factions, all in the name of presenting credentials.
But should any of the blame also land on the doorstep of the PA here in Ramallah?
Of course. Why? Of course. They are the leaders of the Palestinian people. They need to be held accountable. But the only way to hold them accountable is through elections.
And why haven't you had those since 2006?
That's an excellent question. And I would also say that the international community wasn't crazy about holding elections in 2021.
Because they're afraid that Hamas might get in?
Absolutely.
If there was an election held today, would Hamas get in here? What do you think? What's your best guess?
Well, what I would say is if we believe in democracy and elections, we have to believe in it no matter who wins the election. If the world can live with the likes of Smotrich and Ben Gvir, then they have to be able to respect the outcome of any Palestinian election.
But all polls, before 2021 we were supposed to have elections, all polls showed that neither Hamas nor Fatah would get absolute majority in a proportional system. It would be a pluralistic democratic system. Had we have elections, we would not be in this situation. But who opposed elections? Israel. Who opposed elections? The great country of democracy, the United States. And that's why we didn't have elections.
So we're at this inflection point where we've got a war raging in Gaza. You've got almost 9,000 Palestinians dead in Gaza. You've got increasing violence in the West Bank. You've got, a brittle war cabinet in Israel with some extremists in the government there. None of this looks very promising at all. Is there anything positive that might come out of this horrific process? Mustafa, first you.
Only if the world changes its approach, and especially the United States of America. The first thing that should be done is immediate ceasefire to stop the killing of Palestinians.
The Israelis tonight said not going to happen.
Okay, they can say what they want, but if the United States wants, they can restrain them. But it is unacceptable to allow Israel to commit 3 war crimes: genocide against Palestinians, collective punishment against Palestinians, and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in front of the whole world. So if we can have ceasefire, we'll have exchange of prisoners, and maybe this will open the door. It will open the door for a possible, maybe, different kind of peace solution.
And who would the honest brokers be in trying to get all the parties together if we ever get to that stage?
I'm not so optimistic as to call them honest, but I think what needs to happen is for all of these actors to change the playbook that they've been using.
And how do they do that?
Well, they need to once and for all decide whether they are more interested in managing the situation, tolerating these kinds of crimes to happen every so often.
But that's clearly run out of road on both sides. I mean, management. There's no management of anything, is there?
Exactly. But if we have this war and nothing political comes out of it, no political horizon, Israel is not told to let go of the Palestinians it's held captive for more than 50 years, then we're going to be back here again in 1 or 2 years.
As someone who's covered this region for a very long time, I used to live here as well, for a bit in the late 80s, it always struck me that the Israelis and the Palestinians are the most like people in this part of the world. Educated, diaspora, they've been chased out of various countries under horrific circumstances. Is that ridiculously rosy-eyed, Mustafa?
The problem is that one side, in this case Israel and the Israeli establishment, and to our great sorrow, a big part of the Israeli public has one option, which is zero-sum game, either us or them. And they do not accept...
Many Palestinians as well.
Yeah, I understand. But the majority in Israel are like that, and the government is like that, and they do not accept any kind of solution, not two-state solution, not one democratic state. And the only thing they were proposing is an apartheid state, and now they're proposing ethnic cleansing.
All right. Okay, on that rather heavy note, we'd like to follow up, but we can't because we've run out of time. Mustafa Barghouti, Noor Uday, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Krish in London. Krish, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Well, here, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has claimed that tens of thousands of people who joined protests in support of Palestinians over the weekend were taking part in hate marches. She was speaking after the government's emergency COBRA meeting, which decided not to raise the UK's terror threat level. Let's get more from our reporter, Anya Pop. Anya.
Well, yeah, quite ironically, after that emergency COBRA meeting, which was covering community divisions and fears of rising extremism, the Home Secretary has accused herself of ramping up tensions after some of her comments today. Talking about those marches in London, where tens of thousands of people marched largely peacefully, she said this.
We've seen now tens of thousands of people take to the streets following the massacre of Jewish people, the single largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, chanting for the erasure of Israel from the map. To my mind, there's only one way to describe those marches. They are hate marches.
She was reacting in part to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner's concerns this weekend about a rise in extremism and hate crime across the country, which has seen it triple within Muslim communities. And for anti-Semitism, there's been a 14-fold rise in London alone. But her comments calling the marches hate marches were criticised both within and outside of her party. Baroness Saida Varsi, who quit government in 2014 for Gaza, tweeted, "Can someone please tell the Home Secretary the way you keep communities safe is by bringing them together, not by creating divisions based on toxic lies." Shadow Minister called Miss Braverman's comments disingenuous, dangerous and deeply contradictory to the right we all hold to protest.
Well, Anya, both the Conservatives and Labour have taken action against MPs who are defying the party line. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, two fallouts today from each side of the House. The Conservatives, which have been largely united in their comments on this conflict, had their first sacking. Paul Bristow lost his place in government after calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza in a letter. A few hours later, a statement from Downing Street followed, sacking him for comments that were not consistent, they say, with the principles of collective responsibility. On the Labour bench, MP Andy MacDonald has had the whip suspended after being accused of using the controversial slogan "From the river to the sea" to express backing for Palestine at this weekend's marches. He denies those comments, but Labour called them deeply offensive at a time of rising anti-Semitism. Today's outbreaks might feel inconsequential in the context of everything else that's happening in the world, but it's a reminder that what happens in the Middle East, like so many times before, can cause ructions and tensions, not just in the public here, but in politics too.
Anya Pop. Well, Ben Jamal is the director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which is the lead organiser of those marches that have been criticised by the Home Secretary. How much hate do you think there is on those marches?
Well, good evening, Christian. I mean, look, Suella Braverman's comments have been rightly condemned, as you've indicated. I think they are grotesque. This was a march on Saturday, attended by hundreds of thousands of people, supported by MPs, supported by trade union leaders representing millions of British workers. It was unified in its call for a ceasefire, for an end to Israel's commissions of war crimes through its killing of thousands of Palestinian civilians.
But do you accept there's any hate on there? I mean, we've all seen, some images of pretty extreme elements taking part in those, protests. So that there is some, extreme elements there, isn't there?
Well, I mean, let me say, first of all, I would say it was a very peaceful and ordered march. I think in total on Saturday, there were 10 arrests. One of them, at least, was from somebody who was opposed to the march, who attacked one of the demonstrators. Now, unfortunately, one of the features of these marches is that those who have a pro-Israel agenda will seek to take photographs of placards. I think on Saturday, I saw this reported in many elements of the press. there were about 6 or 7 placards that were problematic. And what's going on here is an attempt to say, well, those represent...
Well, they're more than problematic, aren't they? I mean, let's say what they are.
The march, rather than listening to what the organisers of the march say in terms of why we're marching and what the vast majority of what is an diverse march attended by many families coming from all over the UK, what they say they're marching for, which is they're calling for an end to the killing, for the respect for principles of international law, and recognising also they are calling for an end to the complicity of our leaders in giving Israel the green light to continue the commission of war.
Let's address the phrase that a lot of people really object to, and it's the phrase that's come up in the suspension of Andy MacDonald, the Labour MP as well, which is this phrase that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. If you use that phrase, do you accept that that is an anti-Semitic phrase because it implies the eradication of Israel from the river to the sea?
No, this is a really grotesque thing to say. And look, this is a phrase that is used by the vast majority of Palestinians. What it is a call for is for a dismantling of the system of apartheid under which Palestinians live. And if you can give me just a minute to explain the meaning of the words, what it's recognizing is that Israel imposes this system of apartheid on different Palestinians through different mechanisms.
Yeah,
so
but could you address what the phrase means?
Bank,
you're avoiding what the phrase means. I mean, if you say from the river to the sea, don't you mean the end of Israel?
Yeah. No, what it means is the end of the system of apartheid. So it means for Palestinians living under the West Bank, the end of a system of military occupation. For Palestinians living as citizens of the State of Israel, the end of a system of discrimination that treats them as second-class citizens. For Palestinians living in Gaza,
so you unequivocally accept the right of Israel to continue to exist.
It is a call for the dismantling of apartheid. So Israel does not have the right to exist as an apartheid state.
But could you just be clear on that question?
And those who seek to define this as a genocidal call for the elimination of all Israelis, that is equivalent to saying that when black South Africans...
Look, I understand your point about apartheid, but I just want you to be very clear. I'm giving you the opportunity to be very clear that when you use that phrase, you still believe that you want a Palestinian state, but that you also believe that Israel must continue to exist. Is that clearly your position?
Israel cannot continue to exist as an apartheid state, so it's calling for an end to apartheid, and then it's calling, if you like, it's then for the people to decide what system of justice.
I understand you want Israel to change, but do you accept that Israel has a right to exist?
But Christian, where this absurd argument...
It's a yes or a no.
You've referenced the argument. You've referenced, the action taken today against Andy MacDonald. It's instructive to know why he's had the whip suspended and what he said. If I can just quote directly, he said on Saturday, we won't rest until we have justice, until all people, Israelis and Palestinians between the river and the sea, can live in peaceful liberty. Now, what's offensive about those remarks? But Keir Starmer has decided they merit...
We will ask Labour that question. Ben Jamal, thank you very much indeed for your time.